welcome to XReality Podcast. I am the host, Dominic Wu, and beside me is my co-host, Christine Ingaldson. Each week, we will have conversations with industry leaders to explore the unexpected connections and opportunities between diverse sectors in the world of spatial AI and XR. Today, our guest is Caitlin Krause. Caitlin is an experienced designer, author, and keynote speaker. She founded the XR lab MindWise in 2015, and she teaches about digital well-being at Stanford. Her course, Digital Wellbeing, Designing Healthy Relationships with Technology, led to her new book, Digital Wellbeing, Empowering Connection with Wonder and Imagination in the Age of AI, out September 24th with Willie. Caitlin has also authored the book, Digital Satori 2023, Designing Wonder, Leading Transformative Experiences in XR 2021, and Mindful by Design 2019. She advises organizations include Google, Meta, Oracle, TED, and the US State Department. She creates a collaborative experience in social XR, fusing presence, storytelling, meditation, and emotional intelligence. Hey, Caitlin, would you share a little bit about yourself and what's your journey of being where you are today?
Sure. Thank you so much, first off, for having me on this podcast for this conversation. I've been wanting to have it for a while. So, Dominique, Christine, this is, and all of our audience, our community. I would say part of the background, people who know me know that my parents were in the foreign service. So I grew up all over the world, kind of moving and shifting. So the part of my career path that really motivated me was to unite places that might be seen as opposites. So I've studied creative writing and poetry, and I've also been a programmer. And I'm often going into spaces with a curiosity mindset, like how can I learn more? How can I expand my own skill set and turn fear into something that's more of an opportunity? So I like being in places where I'm surrounded by different languages, different cultures. As an adult, I've worked overseas for about 10 years in Belgium and Switzerland. And I have a background also as a full-time teacher in middle school and high school before I founded my company. So sometimes people will say to me, "You're very patient." And I'm like, well, everybody is a storyteller, and it's all about, at all ages, I think we have childlike wonder. So wonder and awe is an area that I love to research because some people have told me that by a certain age, they lose their sense of wonder. Or, the top TED Talk is about how schools kill creativity. Sir Ken Robinson. So I've always been thinking, okay, how can I meet this moment where there is an epidemic of loneliness and create more inclusion and belonging and people feeling like they can have a soulful connection in the midst of using technology? My path is really diverse. It's led me to different projects, different roles and functions. But I think that motivation of healing loneliness and also adding some levity to the gravity, that sense of creative play is what drives me and motivates me.
Yeah, me as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, Christine, do you want to share a little bit, like a shout out to Christine? Yeah, like
me?
Your good news. Yeah.
Oh no, no, I'm just excited because
Yeah,
I just found out today that I got accepted. My narrative VR story was accepted into Fibers for 2024.
this is
So
awesome.
it's called Shadow Mend, and I'm very excited. And yeah, it's about memory and confronting your shadow side and learning from that. Really, how to be resilient, and embracing that human quality of being, there's sorrow in life, but really finding strength through that. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Very deep.
And I like telling stories using animals. So there's animal robots in there, and I'd like to expand upon this idea And yeah, it's like the first fable of others that I think I will create later. Anyway, so thank you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that today we have a lot of things to talk about, and
Yeah.
congratulations about Christine. Just shout out. Yeah, and also so we all know that recently you are going to publish. It's not yet, but I saw a lot of social media, and you talk about your book. Would you like to share the core concept about your book, and how can we balance between the digital world and sense of wonders, those types of balance?
Sure. So I'm really excited about this book coming out into the world. I've been working on it. The ideas go back, years and years, but I've been working on the book for the past 9 months with Wiley as press. I don't know if while I'm sharing, if one of you wants to bring up the page for the book that has the picture of it, but I'm happy to either talk about it or.
Oh yeah, because
sure. You can share. Yeah, feel free.
I think if this conversation also has visuals.
Yes. Later on, I will send you small slides. And every day, I think right now, every day, I will post a little bit of clips. So yeah, definitely share your visual. Yeah.
Well, in lifetime, I guess the premise of the book is really, the metaphor is really on the cover, because this book had a history where the title is Digital Wellbeing. Mm-hmm. And right now, if I say the word well-being and I ask people, in the world, it's a buzzword. So everybody calls their own idea to mind. And when I was writing this book about digital well-being, I didn't want it to be a subset of wellness. So digital well-being is a fusion together. So so if we're showing the cover at the same time, like a share screen.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to show it?
Yeah, that would be great.
Is that okay? Okay, good.
Yeah, please.
Because I'm going to do that right now. Here we go.
So
is that okay? It's right from your.
Beautiful.
Is that fine? Okay.
Yeah, this has the watermark over it. But
is that okay? Yeah, I know.
No, that's totally fine. What I was thinking is
there we go.
Is the Amazon page, Christine?
Because if you have the Amazon page, let's do that.
Yeah. So digital well-being for me is one term, and it's actually connected to well-being. And in the book, in the beginning chapters, I talk about the minutia of why I chose.
That's better.
I chose very deliberately not to hyphenate. I chose to keep this book as one well-being word as a fusion, because sometimes the hyphen is like a speed bump where we think, is it well-being? It's very self-conscious. I understand grammatically as a grammar person myself that a lot of people hyphenate it. But the trend lately is to just create one word of wholeness and think about well-being. If a lot of the human-to-human interactions in this day and age are mediated by technology, digital well-being is really about how we can empower meaningful connection as a tech stack with the human physical self as the center. So if you can imagine, in our lives, how physically conscious are we of, even right now, the way we're sitting, the way we're breathing, the way we're carrying our body. We're going to move into a stage, we already are for those of us in XR, of 3D technology, where we're going to move from these 2D interfaces to things that are very spatial, leading us to what I want to talk about, spatial design. It's that age of people, I think, needing to match their intention with their attention, because all of life is a series of moments of attention. That's really all we have, which is back to mindfulness principles. So with this book, it's about elevation. It's about elevating our consciousness into making these choices about how to use what I think is our primary skill of imagination. How can we keep that imagination and wonder, tap into it, do things like Christine is talking about, and go into our shadow sides, feel like all emotions are welcome. And this is what makes us powerful as humans, powerful leaders. This book has a whole section, each chapter has questions for leaders and teams and reflection exercises, a lot of interactive materials, because I wanted to both demystify concepts about 3D tech and spatial computing, and also give people access to ways to make their mental health better, their lives better, at a time when people's stress, burnout, suicide rates are going up. So I felt a deep need to kind of meet where the world's at with this book. Yeah. So that's behind the cover, why it has so much art and so much color on the cover, because it's not a book about a Band-Aid as much as a new lens.
Wow, this is like a very high level of
Beautiful.
Kind of like the book intro. Can you break it down? For example, like you mentioned that there are some frameworks of digital well-being and how to apply them effectively. Can you give us like examples of one of the frameworks and how can we do it? For example, right now I'm like hiking like a Saturday, Sunday after all the digital bombard. Get into the nature. Like how can we, like what's your wireframes and how can we apply it to our life?
I love it. I want to do a second talk with you where we actually go into the chapters, because
there's a chapter I'm actually interested in already. Which one is it? Can I show the chapter?
There are so many we want to talk about.
Oh yeah.
I was really interested in the heart as a digital kick drum.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Anyway, I hope I'm not distracting, but go ahead and say.
You're not at all. It's really funny because this book is so much into invitation over prescription that each chapter is a bead on a necklace, kind of like it's structured much like the way I build my course at Stanford, where each one has its own integrity. So you could go out of order. You could skip ahead and read about well-being through music, and then backtrack and say, oh, I'm really interested in the history of approach to learning and learning methods of thriving with digital well-being. And then you could do wearables and movement, because I worked with a lot of people who were questioning, do these wearables that track a lot of our biodata, do they help us in terms of well-being, or do they sometimes make us neurotic and self-conscious about the metrics? So there's some interesting both interviews in here, data, insights. And then you'll notice the interlude by Rodney. I'm so grateful that Rodney Mullen was part of this journey, because he's, I don't know if you know Rodney, he invented a lot of the skateboarding tricks.
Yeah.
About these days.
I'm like, really? I know, that's so cool. I'm like, that's awesome. Wait, where is that?
Rodney spoke at AWE back in 2022. And he and I became good friends, and we kept having these philosophical conversations together. Rodney's been an advisor working with MIT Media Lab and also with the Boston Ballet, and places where people are using spatial digital kind of analogs, but also presencing in their bodies and using a lot of their body state as predictive. When you can see yourself in place and time and you have that proprioception. I think skateboarders are gifted at this when they get into a state of flow. So Rodney and I had a talk at one point about flow states and creativity, and how we kind of see our actions as extensions of an intention that is very core and intimate to ourselves and our human presence. It's hard to explain until you get to chapter 8.
There it is, right here.
It is very much about imagination. Rodney, of course, he's just a gifted mind. But working with AR tools and working with a lot of spatial layering, I think by the time we address chapter 8 and immersive imagination, it starts to kind of click for me and for others who have read this book, how virtual reality and specifically a lot of 3D tools can be liberating, can promote freedom, can be expressive and creative. And a lot of the trend has been kind of saying, I've had people come up to me and say, oh, so you work with VR. Are you advocating for escapism, or do you want to escape into a digital realm and never come back? And I'm thinking, why so binary? Like, what about 30 minutes of having an embodiment that's completely different, expressing yourself in a new way, and then also coming back across that threshold to your physical primary source and saying, oh, I see things in a new way now. So that's it. Yeah. So back to Dom's question about frameworks and applicable tools for when hiking in the woods or anything like that. There are a lot of frameworks, and there are a lot of little kind of exercises that people can do. And especially in the beginning, when I talk about in chapter 3, the facets of wonder, and start to give people invitations for looking at things in a new way, like even when you're hiking, to really observe nature around you and drop out of self-consciousness into more of an observer, celebrating what I like to call the extraordinary and the ordinary. You start to notice details about the environment and also about your own physical reactions that I think wake up people's senses, which is why nature can be such a powerful tool for well-being. People who can't get to the woods themselves, they could do something in VR or XR, even though I don't see it as a replacement as much as something that gives a little more access. I'm saying this as I sit outside in a garden, it's like so there are lots of invitations in the book, and the way I frame it is I'm not going to give people like 7 rules for a digital well-being life. It's not a prescription as much as a context-based solution. I even tell my students, like, the number one thing when they come into my course is to source their own wholeness, because a lot of them come in saying, I'm broken, or I feel addicted in certain ways. Certain things that there's a lot of shame over our relationship with digital tools. And I don't think shame is serving us. I believe a lot in what Brené Brown says, and these emotions of curiosity and of self-compassion are what is going to help the future of mindful well-being. And tech is not the enemy. It really isn't. It's just that a lot of our algorithms had been built upon, and we can stop sharing if you want.
Oh, I was going to ask it. Yeah.
It's totally up to us. It's just, I was thinking, there you are. A lot of our algorithms were based on prioritizing engagement. And if engagement is our eyeballs, then the models are really not structured in a way that's liberating for humans, because, that's about repeat dopamine spikes and, what's going to keep us scrolling. So I think this 1.0 social media is going to be changing in the next, hopefully less than 5 years, because more people are aware now of what's happening under the surface. So I think XR and new AI models could actually lead the way if we're deliberate about what we're prioritizing.
And that's exactly why I got into this. I have a very big creative background. And I got into it because I saw the damage being done with social media, but I love tech because I also think that, it's another, to me, I use VR as a medium, an art medium. And there's just so much with that. When I first started, learning how to create VR experiences, actually, the real world looked really trippy to me. It looked really cool. So there was something about, it's like, to me, it felt complimentary, and I could appreciate being outside even more after being in VR. And I liked both. But it made me like see the details of the grass outside better and I'll never forget that experience.
Yeah. I had someone say to me recently, and it's funny because I have a physical tree behind me.
Yeah. Beautiful.
There it is. We're like, well, we forget what tree bark feels like if we're in VR and we just have simulations of trees all over the place. I think, I believe that we'll care even more people who don't necessarily have their own garden spaces. They might think, oh, there's a wholeness here that I feel, or some kind of invitation to be better stewards of our physical planet. And also there's a lot to be said about resources. How efficient can it be to model situations, in XR, and then use this physical world as a place to be caring and more conscious, more collective. I know we brought up the word resilience earlier, and I really love that word. And I think there are lots of, I'm really into, using nature as metaphors, and maybe it's not a literal transfer, but how much can we take that? And there's an analog of co-sensing or co-presence, or the way that trees relate to each other, make space for each other. Resilience for me is a collective word. And so often people think, I have to be strong. That means I'm resilient. And I've been working with the Air Force as one of my clients because they have high levels of stress. And also, they want to encourage resilience tools that also use XR as part of their training set. And it's a really interesting, beautiful situation with communities of leadership in the Air Force, because they understand some of the XR technology, and then also using it to understand more about their emotional intelligence, about how to reach out, how to reframing. Reframing is a concept where you change your relationship with how you framed a situation. Like, for example, teachers in the pandemic, a lot of them felt shame, anxiety, like I didn't transition well into this situation of digital learning, and that was hard. But then reframing it would be, wow, I was really resilient and adaptive, because in the span of 2 weeks, I was there for my students, did the best that I could, and also learn new technology in the meantime. So a lot of my teacher training has been about, well, how can we reframe some of these ways that we both treat ourselves and look at our situations, in a world where sometimes we can feel very much on the spot, like everything is documented in minutia, so we can't make a mistake. So I've been looking at failure models and how
I love
teams
that.
can embrace more failure and look at failure as a flywheel.
That's how I view resilience too. Like, you just keep going no matter what, because you just see the vision that you have of what you want to create, and you just keep going towards that no matter what gets in your way. Like, I just see that as and the reframing, and how can you find like the good things about like failure, what can you learn, and you just keep going forward.
And it also like reminds me of like, just like a Caitlin, before you mentioned that school is killing the creativity, and I totally agree, because when right now this is like my first class at Kenyatta College, and I start like hear like students said that, oh, like they are frustrated. I was like teaching like a Unity, just like teaching them how to code, teaching artists how to code, and they start apologize. Oh, I couldn't finish this, and people start feeling like they should know, but they didn't know it. It's like they are giving themselves a lot of shame, like why they couldn't do it, and they feel frustrated. But I think for the reframing, it's also part of the education. You will feel like frustrated. Before, I believe three of us already had a lot of frustrations when we code the first time. So just like and also like Christine, you mentioned that, you have a vision, and you are getting a lot of failures, but each time you do it better, because sometimes we put ourselves out there without perfectly said, I am capable of doing something, and you just start trying it, and you will definitely get failed. So I totally agree with like a reframing. So I was thinking about, how can I reframe this types of like frustration of learning things, but into a positive, hey, at least you are trying it. And before you didn't know it, but now you are trying it. So it's fine. Next time you will do better.
And what does it mean to be at our edges? Like, how cool is it sometimes to feel, I don't know, when I'm feeling discomfort, of course, I don't love that feeling. Like, I know it'd be weird if I was like, oh, I love all this.
I love failure. All the time.
Feels good. It reminds me that I'm human, that I'm alive, and that there's a formative process to something that's kind of necessary. Like, I keep thinking, if this, then that. Like, I couldn't have this without that. And I do talk about it in the book. I have a story that kind of starts out the book about the vinegar tasters. which I won't give away. But the metaphor is just that life is crunchy. And if it's not, then maybe someone's surrounding themselves with pillows. Like, do we want to always live comfort zone? Because comfort is it might become more and more alluring with states of AI and technology. We kind of empower ourselves to have lives that can be more and more convenient. And this is part of this is why I like travel and why I like adaptation, because it kind of reminds me that I'm not in control, and that's exactly the way it should be. And that my present state, I do a lot of kind of self-reflection and journaling, and a lot of my present state of attachment, I think XR can help us. This is another, like, XR is great because it helps us detach from one fixed identity, one fixed mindset. You kind of go into this mode of both curiosity and plasticity, where you start to see yourself either as a transparent eyeball or part of a system. So often when I travel, I find myself just, looking around and noticing conversations, noticing people, and kind of being more in service and not just receiving my own comfort.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah, I totally agree. For example, like right now, I can tell you, before, I've been doing UX, UI, and product design for past 13 years. And this year is the time that I transition my entire product design background to teaching. And I am in the progress of getting like a substitute high school teacher, like CBEST. Like, yeah, and I'm learning like a math right now. I was like, what? And a year ago, I wouldn't even think about I'm getting a certification. And because right now I'm building a product which is like a turning literature into immersive experience for like a middle school, high school. So in order to get them, I have to be more like, I need to be a teacher or something, like, so I can get closer to them. So right now I'm going to community center and just like hanging out with the director. And I would say that a year ago, my job is a UX UI designer. I would every day just look at computer and work on something, and manager talk to me. I wouldn't even think that I will be where I am today. That it feels like totally not my path, but I am enjoying like a very out of comfort zone, especially when people say no to you.
Yeah.
No, we don't need it or something. And yeah, so I totally agree with like just like not myself, but just how can this being worked with like something. So I'm still learning. Yeah.
And can we shine a light on that? Because I feel like now is a good moment as you're learning and transitioning. You probably,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is kind of, I feel like it's at the end of my UX UI. I don't want to say the end, but it feels like it's a good conclusion. And now I'm doing something else.
Well, this is also my interview question for you. Did something in this book kind of lead toward this now moment for you of transition? Like, what was the bridge between, because this is such a powerful book with a lot of frameworks and a lot of useful design principles. And I do think, for my life as an educator and a designer, I see a lot of connection. So is there any kind of principle or takeaway from this that served as a bridge or something that you found out through this process? Because this is an awesome book, and, I'm sure there's so many layers of connection, and well done.
Thank you so much for talking about the book. So those will be when I worked for Meta back in 2021. I joined a lot of meetings, and I feel like I was privileged because every app in the store is 1 cent. So, and I got a lot of free credit. For some reason, I just got like a 60, 80 like free credit from Meta. And pretty much I can buy everything for free. And I start thinking about, wow, this is a kind of like something that is a bonus. How can I feel like I am mandatory, or I feel a mission that maybe I can play all the games and analyze it, pros and cons. So every day in the morning, before everything starts, I have a yard back in Costa Mesa, and I just drink my coffee and play games and document. I feel like, yeah, and I want to publish something because it's not really internal or any NDA stuff, but I just want to share. I know a lot of people doesn't have the privilege to play so many games, and it's very costly. So I just want to document. And later on, the more that I wrote it, it was like a 500 pages of notes of like at least a couple of hundred games. And also during the meeting, there were have I got a lot of good points. Like during the meeting, I usually put a summarize at the end, and it all adds up everything. And when I look at news or try different things and look up all the stuff, that was my database. And later on, I was thinking about, yeah, why not to make a book that for people, and especially, I remember back in 2022, I spoke at AWE. One person asked me like, does there any UX principles for XR? And I say, I haven't heard of it. Maybe because when the hardware was not fixed, then software always go with the hardware. So for example, if your screen is not set yet, how can you even design, or your controller, you don't even know what's that? How can you define?
You have no parameters.
Yeah. So that's why I was thinking about, yeah, maybe I can come up with something. And I remember I interviewed 38 people, industry kind of like the designer, developers, and business people. And I asked one of the developer who was very famous, and he told me that there's no, whatever you set up a rule, it will be break. For example, like it totally reminds me, because for example, like every time when we set up a rule, just like you said that we set up a regulation, but those are just for that moment.
Right.
And in the future, it will change. For example, like I remember at Meta, our manager, I don't want to say what team, whatever, but I got told that you couldn't, like interface shouldn't put on top, should put on the hand. Why? Like, for example, there's a book talk about for when Pomolaki design or like Pomolaki thinks that when people get into VR, they look at their hand first, because they want to make sure they are exist or not. So it's kind of like unconsciously, intuitively, they will look down. So we were be told that you couldn't design or something if the UI is outside of the comfort zone of a certain angle. It's very hard to look up. So we are trying to, for example, if you see the nav bar, it's all under. And I was follow that. And I didn't even use the critical thinking. Why am I doing that? But I just accept it. But later on, if you see Pillow is the game which is on the ceiling, and they want you to lay down on the bed. Everything is on the ceiling, which I think is brilliant, because ceiling, there's nothing. If you put on the wall, you might bump into something. But I think this is brilliant. And this is totally against the role that I learned. So according to what I interview, I think his name is Lee. Lee told me that, yeah, whatever you learn, and for example, like in HTC Vive, they have a checkbox, which is you couldn't shake cameras too violently, because this will make user feel bad. But he said that, hey, but if you see Gorilla Tech, the camera shake crazily, and every kid loves it.
They love
and I was
it.
like, yeah, then what's the point? So after I wrote it, if you see there's a chapter or something, and I said, this book is meant for you to learn the basic, and please break all the rules if you can. Yeah, so
that's what I believe too.
I believe the same thing.
Learn the book, learn the rules
first,
break the rules, and also understand that in place and time, sometimes someone was trying to postulate something, seemed logical, but then people sort of encoded that as the expectation, and then we're living into, which is kind of why back to when I was explaining the book cover, I didn't want digital well-being to be robot arm meets human arm. And I didn't want it to be a lotus flower. These were all suggestions for the cover. I didn't want it to be wistful person looking at the sky, because all of that was a suggestion. And I realized it was all derivative based on what you would expect something. And then you're reinforcing the model of the way it's always been, instead of maybe having this leap into something that's a different frame of thinking. And then someone is in that frame and saying, oh, wow, I didn't know this existed. That's interesting. And it's funny you mentioned pillow and places where you look up, because that's actually when the body state is in a state of awe. When we look up at the sky,
Yes.
or when we're in a cathedral, or when our body is like, wow, look. And I do believe that you can think about your physical body. This is also why they say the mouth goes open when you put on VR and you have that face that I call wonder face, when people are like, it's because we're so we're mirroring emotionally what's happening, and we're so open that we're in a state of complete vulnerability and surrender, because that's washing over us. And I look, sometimes I travel on trains and I look at people hunching over phones and kind of in a state that's the physical sad state. Even if they're not emotionally sad, they're kind of looking all very sad. And I'm like, oh, we live in the most awkward time to be human. It's so awkward. Like our interfaces are not yet mindfully engaged with our bodies in a state where we can breathe really healthily and take in air. So this kind of reminds me, I have a sense of humor, and when I lead VR sessions, I guide people, and if there are people in my group with long hair, I just I advise that we're going to wear little headbands underneath our VR headsets, and that's because we don't want to be like pushing wisps out of our way. And then I get I have a huge water kind of like sippy with grippers, and then it has a straw. And I joke, and that's so my avatar head doesn't go like this as I'm drinking water. It's all the little mindful things that I think sometimes, I have a yoga mat in my studio, and it's like the shape of how I want my play space. It's like a custom built yoga mat that's, more like a giant circle, but form fits function. We're at a stage where we can life design in better ways. We just sometimes have to break up our expectation of pattern like we thought. I find this whole dialogue really inspiring with the two of you, because we've been in those worlds, and we know the rules. And also it's a lot like poetry. When I taught poetry to students, I would teach them the code of poetry, and then people understand free verse. Like free verse sounds so just kind of random if you don't understand that free verse was kind of pushing against the movement of very strict verse frames and models. And then when you know what you can infuse, you can put enjambment in a certain place, or you can put assonance, alliteration, you can play with vowel sounds, you can use slant rhymes and have different like secret rhyme schemes that come up for people. One of my pet peeves right now is it's okay that AI can't write very good poetry. It always wants to write rhyming couplets. And I find that really funny, because, I've been playing around a lot with digital tech and poetry, and so far it doesn't have the same soul as a human who understands the rules and then also knows how to break them.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. So I really enjoyed you talk about the pattern, and we are trying to break it. And I saw tons of patterns breaking. For example, we are all in education places. I have some students who are so worried, and as far as I know, a lot of Gen Zers, they are after graduating from high school, they directly jump into the blue collar work. And all those types of interesting patterns start breaking. And also I read another news that developer was the need of developers decreasing. And Amazon's AWS manager also told the software engineer that, once the AI start coding, and you guys don't have to come. So before our chat or before our meeting, Christine and I, we had the weekly news kind of a podcast. and we were thinking about, yeah, it seems like an AI or a robot is keep taking over our work or labors. And a lot of people, or our mindset is that the school teach us skills and we use those skills to earn money, to earn income for us. And those patterns seems, just like you said, that we are breaking our existing pattern. And how can you think, like, for example, Gen Z, a lot of people said that they are in anxious types of mind setting. Yeah, and they grew up in the social media, which is like unlike us. I mean, for me, I'm grow up like a little bit earlier, like a late millennial. So I still can see like a trees or something and not really involved with social media. But what do you see like this types of AI take over and anxiety, and how can we types of like what's the meaning of life? Because if AI deprive, or if work is just an option, then a lot of people's meaning or life meaning is kind of putting on what can they do, what can they produce, what can they impact. What do you see this types of like a transition?
Well, I think it's awesome that you two, it sounds like you doubled up. So you had a recording of this week in AI and then also this conversation.
Yes.
In terms of this week, I don't know if you covered this, but there was a huge debate in the arts creative worlds because two things happened at once, and I don't think they knew about each other beforehand. Ted Chiang published a New Yorker piece that was huge this past week, and it was about AI and creativity. So if we wanted to, you could just Google it and pull it up. But Ted Chiang is the writer behind movies like Arrival. You know, he writes short stories that are amazing. They're sci-fi, futuristic, and he always writes them with this just exquisite human emotion and sentiment. And so I'm thinking about the title of his article, but it was in the New Yorker last week, and it was about creativity and AI.
I think I found it. Let's see if it's this. Is it why AI isn't going to make art?
Yes. Yes, that's it.
Oh, let's look at this. Hold on. Let me get the share.
So it's,
go ahead and keep talking. Yeah.
It's about artfulness. And, you know, I think back to Gen Z and what's happening. Like I love his lines in this piece. To create a novel or painting, an artist makes choices that are fundamentally alien to artificial intelligence. So again, kind of my take on well-being, that it's intention meeting attention. AI might have certain intentions that are programmed as, you know, what it should be accenting, but its choices are not the same as a human soul creating art. And so Ted Chiang is writing this article saying, you know, what does it mean to be reflective? What does it mean to be human, to be intentional? And, you know, how are we using AI augmentation? You know, I believe in the augmentation and I believe in the process. I love some AI tools. I don't always feel wonder and awe about them, I have to say. And I'm somebody that loves when Jaron Lanier says things like, let's not pray to the machine like it's a god. You know, AI is not a mystical god. So first Ted Chiang publishes this piece, hits the New Yorker. Then within days, the big trend that middle schoolers and high schoolers love called NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month of November, you know, people writing a full novel in November.
Yeah.
This is huge. When I was teaching in high school, I had kids that were doing NaNoWriMo, and I also thought, okay, this is motivating for people. How can you write a whole novel in November? So NaNoWriMo had something happen where they basically said, yeah, everyone, you can use AI tools to write your novels. And so they made a public statement saying that AI was great for novel writing. And that's interesting because then the whole writing community was saying, well, then what is writing? Which is really kind of funny because let me see if I can find.
Yeah, and I'll see if I can find that too.
I'm just looking at some of the, let me see. This is quite, all right. So in our Zoom, I'm going to put a link in the chat since.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So maybe you can draw it up there and then show it. So the whole internet was kind of up in arms because it's funny, right? Like you can see,
There we go.
in this article, I think the funny thing is that, so the acronym National Novel Writing Month, I love the Twitter. Thanks to AI, I just finished my NaNoWriMo novel a few months early. I'm excited to read it. Like,
so you don't even know what's
right.
that.
It's gonna be an age where everyone's
oh my goodness.
I think a famous, it was Milan Kundera. He said, the world will be at an end when everyone's a storyteller and no one's listening. And
oh, wow.
My goodness, if we're all writing novels created by AI, super. But, and this is where I would say, let's use AI to help us maybe storyboard or come up with some ideas. Concepting, and then so maybe NaNoWriMo could start with an October week of story creation with AI.
I agree.
Then the writing process, because for me, I don't know about you two, but my physical body gets into a state of flow where creatively I would see it as like an annoying mosquito if my AI tool was like, how about this? How about that? Like in the middle of all of this, and this is why if I'm coaching like how to create, I'll have deep work Cal Newport sessions where you just turn off the internet and you go to your primary sources and you use some writing tools, and whether it's a digital writing tool or a physical, I love manual. I think there's something about hands. It's funny because digital actually came from the word digit for fingers, and it's like, oh, how did digital become digital?
Right.
Creation, and our creation, the hands are the execution of our will. Like we have to think, oh, what do I feel like? And then your body is producing something. And I'm not a purist that thinks, oh, AI is the enemy and it's going to like make everything. I think it can open up to these concepts that are surprising, and you can start thinking of metaphors in different ways. But it's when we surrender authority to the AI to be the creative genesis force, and then I think it can unwittingly make a human not trust themselves. Like I've seen some kids like, I don't even know what quality is until an AI produces it, and I'm kind of impatient. And there's something that happens when you sit still and you're with something like an intimidating blank page. Maybe AI can just get you over that speed bump, but then your state of flow is not something that's anchored to a tool to constantly bat back and forth, because that level of noise, what's coming out of us as humans, I think, is often, and it's going to sound like spirituality, but I do think it's about something that is very pure and about the space between the notes. John, I brought a lot of
John Cage.
No, that's good.
John O'Donohue is an Irish poet, and he talks about the threshold. He talks about, in XR, we have a lot of talk about portals and how we move into new states or into new spaces. And a threshold is literally like a doorway. What does it take to move through transitions and to actually honor that we're making intentional choices to cross that threshold, to open up space.
I talk about that all the time.
Be with ourselves. In Stanford, I start with different meditations for the classes about digital well-being. And sometimes it's about, feeling our senses as we sit outside for 5 minutes. Sometimes it's about, mindful breathing, and I teach them breathing practices. And at first, some students come in because it's an elective, and they'll have been in computer science and other classes, and they've never had anything. And I'm like, that's great. You don't have any meditation history. What does it mean to be human and to allow ourselves time just to be, just to arrive? not to have to do anything or perform anything, but what's the space before that moment where you kind of need to ground with yourself. And students have said that helps a lot because we're in a very performative culture where
Yes.
you don't always have that permission to be. And some people used to label that as boredom. Like, oh, there's not an activity for this moment. I just sit with myself and like allow my thoughts to be anything and just kind of savor them and then drop away from my thoughts and just focus on the anchor of my breath. Yeah, so I think somehow this relates to Dom's question of how the future is going to look, because I think I'm hoping that we adopt more practices like that in ironically slowing down, being intentional, and then using AI tools to help augment our creativity without replacing that primary connection.
Yeah, like I see people getting so excited because they think, oh, AI is just going to I'm just going to type something and it's going to make my whole VR world for me. And I'm like, I don't like that. I'm like, I like having the space. I like mixing up kind of realism with low poly. And honestly, my process also, I've had a lot of people get surprised when they see that I'm drawing by hand my level design often. And they look at me like, you drew this? And I'm like, and sometimes it's super messy and everything, but that's like what being human, I think, is. It's messy. And I think people appreciate the imperfections now. And I was really worried to submit my game to places because I thought, oh, this isn't perfect, that isn't. But then I thought, yeah, but the whole point of this experience is that remembering being human. And if there's mistakes, that's going to make it more authentic to me versus like this just pure thing. I don't like anything, even, before all of this, I really used to like more messy art. And that doesn't mean it's ugly. It just means that you can see like the stroke of the artist's paintbrush. You can see where they maybe put their finger on the painting and just like move something around. And if you can't see that, I used to not really like art that was too realistic because I felt like you couldn't see the humans impact in there. And so when I create these experiences, I want them to see that I was in there, and they're now in there experiencing it and finding out who they are. Oh, I love that term.
Wabi-sabi, the
yes.
beautiful and the broken. So another one of the books, I love this conversation because I thought this morning, how can I bring my favorite books to this process?
Oh, we got to talk about more. I know.
The aesthetics
more
of
books.
something that is broken. And it's even like this book says, beauty can be coaxed out of ugliness.
Yes.
Like, what does it mean?
That's great.
Where, the wabi-sabi is this impermanence, imperfection, incompletion. Like, if something is too complete and too perfect, then it would be sort of this uncanny valley. But also in a lot of the history of art, there's a metaphysical basis of this idea of impermanence and also of things being beautifully broken. Like nothing in this book, it says things are either devolving toward or evolving from nothingness. Like it's emptiness. Like emptiness is an art form. People who produce pottery know this, that it's about the openness of the space, and the container that surrounds it is giving a certain breath. So and I know I'm speaking very abstractly, but all of this is underneath, for me, approaches to well-being and wonder and awe that are not clinical. They're actually teaching people, be curious, like accept your animal body along with your digital physical. Like there's again, it's non-binary. Like we are shaping the system, as Marshall McLuhan would say, the system is shaping us. Like we choose our media, and if we're choosing it in a moment, allowing for surprise, then it's always going to be emergent. Like and it's, that can be frustrating for people who want perfection, but I like to embrace that I'm always growing, and even one piece of art, I'll come to your pieces that you create, and each experience is going to be different because I'm different.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it can give, my students have said that learning about XR can be really liberating through a course about digital well-being, because they come to it and they're invited to use their own experience as a testing ground. kind of like Dom, you were saying every morning in the garden, you were responding to these pieces and writing about them and
Yeah.
producing. I think XR can be that sort of state of play where people are thinking beyond, just, let's create a quick app that solves this and creates more noise in the world, to like, what do I really want to create? And what would I create for myself if I was a designer and I'm one of the first users, So we always have, so I teach at Stanford as a lecturer, and I also have my own company, MindWise. So I get to do the design and do a lot of the studio work with different projects while I'm also teaching students, so it's a nice convergence. So I always craft my education as a portfolio kind of experience where the assessment models are in a lot of longer ways of, it's formative, but students are really empowered not to feel like they need to perform as much as, show up and invite their own reflection.
Wow. Yeah. I remember I talked to my student. I mean, I told them that my goal is for you guys after this class, if you guys still want to code, still want to create project after this class, and I think I'm a successful teacher. If after the class, I told them that it's not like the matter of you perform or you create a great portfolio on your final. It's more about you get through this process. But after the class, you're still interested, you still burned, you still feel like, wow, I want to code more. And I think that I'm a great, I think, yeah, because I feel like sometimes, just like you said, that school kills the creativity. I was born in Taiwan and I was receiving the Asian education. I can tell you how I learned English. I bought a dictionary and I tear out the spine and I clip A to Z. And every day I go to school. When I went to school, I read one small pages. That's how I learned all the vocabulary before when I was in high school. So yeah, so you can tell, like, I remember my mom, like when I was like 5 years old or 6 years old, my mom was a teacher. All my family was like education. And my mom used one. I mean, my mom argued that it's different types of version, but types of same materials taught 25 years for the elementary school. So that's why my mom wanted me to, I actually had a certification teaching art back in Taiwan, but I ran away. I got scholarship to study art center. My mom told me, don't do graphic design. It's too much work. Be a teacher. It's great. You got paid. You got like a vacation and winter vacation. Yeah, it's like my mom wants me to be a teacher. I just run away because I think those types of suffocated, like high performance, and treat students as a product, and the grade is your final product. So at the beginning of the class, I want student to perform well, but at the end, I told myself I don't want to kill your appetite, because I think a teacher should be the person who makes you or give you some interesting aspect for you to explore. It's your life. It's not me forcing you within this like 19 weeks you get a really good like a Unity game. That's not really the purpose, and later on you drop Unity and don't use it again. It's not like that. It's more like, how can I inspire you, or how can you, after receiving the messages from me constantly, and you become your own and explore on your own. So that's kind of also my thoughts of education. It's not really about final product. It's more about the process. And after this process, you still like coding.
Yeah. And you feel empowered. You asked about frameworks in the book, and there is a framework that, so after I taught for 10 years, I wrote a book called Mindful by Design. And, the subtitle is that practical guide. I wanted to give teachers a guide that would show how social emotional learning, mindfulness, creativity can be infused into education without feeling like you have to take away from time on curriculum. Because a lot of teachers would think in a way like, oh, this is a meditation exercise for well-being. And I was thinking, no, there's actually, I mean, yes, and I guess that there are ways to meet both in the way that you are teaching. So there's biomimicry. Biomimicry can be really curiosity based, go into science curriculum. There's a whole chapter on storytelling, empathy, and kindness. And, I mention all this because I think there's Digital Mindful Citizen. This came out in 2019, and it's still being used sometimes in corporate teams, saying this helps my corporate team have exercises to understand each other, to get together. There are things that involve story of my name, people having prime values that they share, gratitude practices, they're just a little, but I realized I had to start with teachers. And so if we're talking about schools killing creativity, I actually know so many educators who are part of the force for good who are not, it's like there is hope. All schools are not killing creativity. There are great things happening in education, and I think they sometimes don't fit the stereotypes or the tropes that make the media. And they're often because leadership empowered those teachers to teach in new ways, to look at new assessment models, to serve as, what you're saying, like the mentor and the hero's journey, where the student plays the hero, the teacher can be a mentor, and they're supported with what they need. I think sometimes teachers feel under-supported. So I think a lot about, how to create environments that then scale into, right now what I've been realizing is that business environments are learning environments, at scale too. So every leader is kind of like a guide and a mentor in the same way that a teacher might be. And one of the frameworks has 4 parts where, and this is also in the book that's coming out, Digital Wellbeing, because the 4 parts are structures for culture. And the culture structure of the 4-part wheel starts with dignity. So, it's a very values-based system, but I realized if I didn't embody dignity and hold each person, whether it was in a professional group or in my teaching group, each student was invited to treat themselves with dignity and treat others with dignity, we actually shared collective norms and built the norms for the classroom together. Just like if I'm having a community base in VR, a social space, I'll invite the community to help me create our norms, because if the community is co-responsible, then it's cooperative and it's co-sensing, and they feel a sense of social trust. And then that trust also makes people kind of rise the bar, saying, what kind of world do we want to create? It's not just fulfilling Caitlin's dictator model, it's a different model. So there's dignity first. And if you have dignity, then that empowered freedom. So freedom would be the next part of the wheel. And in a way, I didn't put this in the book, but it would be the part 2. Dignity could represent the ground or the earth, because you feel like you have your ground. When you have dignity, you're rooted. You feel like a tree with its roots. When you have freedom, that would be like the water, because water can take any shape to its container. So freedom to me came from dignity, because then suddenly the people who are in the group, again, could be students, could be leaders in their teams, but they feel like they're invited to create, to have some kind of freedom to feel themselves in a different way. How do I actually want to be? What's my story? And then with freedom, if you have dignity and freedom, then suddenly you have that imagination. Like imagination is not just like, let's be imaginative. It actually has to start with dignity and then freedom. And then the imagination, I connected to more of an air quality of what if, and how could I, and is XR the place to do this? And, where are some insights coming in? Because I empowered myself with freedom, suddenly I'm having this like download of an epiphany that feels really wild, but I'm going to go for it because I have that like huge imagination space to dream really big. And I'm looking up at the sky and I'm, playing. And then I realized that's not enough. Like it's good. And then sometimes if you're just always in imagination state, then great. But I needed as a leader and a teacher to empower with agency. So agency is the end of it's sort of the 4-part where agency would be the fire force. Like, where is there actually a place where people are empowered? You know, like you have imagination, you've created something. Where's your audience? What's your world? You know, kids, adults, places, they always want to know that they matter, they belong, and also that there's, you know, I do think everyone has a vital creative force that wants to be an agent for something good in the world. And when people feel like they can act, like they have some way of acting, and if I can be a mentor and give that, whether it's for you know, I've been doing a lot of work with social good and places that have some type of engagement model like that, then you start to see, oh, I have impact, like I matter, and I can create places that are better for other people. And then it's a wheel, because the people who have agency hopefully are empowering others with dignity and giving them some freedom and encouraging their imagination and letting them have agency in different worlds. So yeah, so that's one of the models in the book that came as a principle out of a lot of experiences that I've had with teams and culture and co-creative spaces, whether it's in XR with avatars or whether it's in a classroom with students or a group of leaders in an Air Force training. Those 4 parts are principles that I think if people can make them more structured as part of their conscious choices, then groups have impact and people have a feeling of belonging without needing to conform and all be the same.
Yeah, it reminds me of like when I like this is my first course teaching Kenyatta, and I heard like, because my first class, so I was like trying to figure it out, how can I make the best course I can. I heard a lot of like students said that, oh, you know, during critiques in other classes, student might be too mean to each other, like make people feel scared or something. And some student, because after I finished curriculum, I asked one of the future student to review with me, because I told her that I need your advice because you are the user. I'm using the user experience. So she mentioned that, oh, just be careful, maybe have a lot of rules and tell people don't be nice to people. And later on, I came up with like a program. Maybe that's too childish, but I called it Angel Program. So whoever performed well, I will give them scores. And whoever who didn't put the assignment, I make a group of people to support that student. And if because the highest score I only give you is 92. And if you help this student and this student because of your help and submit the assignment, or you help the student debug, and you got like a 5 additional score. So you reach out to 97, like an A. So tons of students during the workshop, everybody gather together, and like you can see 2 to 3 people help one student. And because of that, since it seems like make student not like, oh, I need to be better than you because my score can be better than you. It's the opposite, is that I want to help you so I can get a higher score. I don't know whether that is too much or not, but I find out that it feels like during the critique, student is trying to say nice things about others because, hey, that's my mentees, or hey, we were in the same group and I was trying to help you. So people start saying something positive. Yeah, and I was thinking about, this is also just echo what you said, that dignity, freedom, imagination, and agency. And start from, and I usually tell students, if you know something, or if you know the assignment better than other students, and you can be the teacher. So so I think, so this types of like empower in, and also I call this is called humanity credits or bonus. Is that you help me to help this student, right? And also you help student, and this is also a chance for you to talk to the student. So this is something that I said that it's different, separate you from a chatbot, because
Yeah.
if I put whatever I want, the chatbot can generate code or in the future generate an app. But you on top of it, you can help other people. You interact with other people. You impact other people's lives. So yeah, so you get the bonus.
Well, and imagine if, I don't know how well this fits, but imagine what I've witnessed is sometimes there's a feeling like, oh, if I'm being helped, I'm lower and I'm being helped.
Oh,
And
yeah,
it's like,
that's true.
and so again, with the reframe, what would happen if the student that was being helped saw that, okay, we know that structure pyramid, we learn like 90% of what we teach to others. So they're actually helping the person that's helping them, they're helping them practice their own skills of so they're serving, they're not just this passive object like I need help, I need to be helped. It doesn't mean anything about lower. What if people are exactly the same level of dignity, and that person that's being helped later is going to be the helper, and they like co-reflect afterwards, where there is that reinforced message like, yeah, you weren't just the needy person that's beneath somebody else. Like everybody has the exact same level of dignity, and you didn't realize it, but you're like in the sandbox playing with somebody else, like giving them a role play where they get to up their skills because they had to articulate it as if, sometimes when I get something, I just assume everybody else understands it. And then the practice in teaching it, those people that I'm helping help me because I'm like, oh yeah, I had to break down that topic.
Yeah. Right.
And then they're co-reflecting, how well did you do at creating a metaphor or, helping me teach. So everybody plays a role where I feel like the student that's being helped doesn't realize how necessary they are and how.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Because every time when I teach, I feel like I have a certain types of, I was trying to get rid of the Asian types of, I usually call myself detoxic. Those types of like a hierarchy and like a force you to perform really well. I'm trying to get rid of that. But for some reason, you see, like, thank you for reminding me that student who need help also helps the people who help them. So it's kind of like, it's like a lot of like logic. Yeah. So
you're just amazing. I feel like you just, I love, thank you. Cause sometimes I'm just saying things and I'm like, I've actually had a talk where I invited someone from the front row up to dance with me. I was demonstrating something and I just said, hey, will you dance with me? And I feel like this is one of those experiences.
Yeah.
You would say, sure, I'll dance with you. And then we were dancing. And what I was showing the audience is that, you can't dance without any friction. Like you need to have some kind of feeling. And it doesn't mean disagreement, but you have to be authentically there in connection and co-sensing. So, great mentors and, everybody takes sometimes roles being the leader or being the follower. But it involves a certain level of trust, right? To be able to do that. It's the follower has a lot of trust. So I'll tell that sometimes to students. I won't invite them to dance with me, but it's a metaphor where to have a great dance partner, you can't have spaghetti arms. If someone's always like, sure, that's wonderful, that's great, then they're not giving you the tension of what you need to actually co-sense and feel someone. So my ideal environments are not where people are always in mindless agreement. But I think we're in we're moving into the part of the talk where I get really passionate about the state of the world. I think that, again, XR can be a source of people having these dynamic conversations where people don't have to agree, but they're invited to embody dignity and they're invited to maybe see from different perspectives in new ways, because otherwise we silo and we start to other and we start to become too proud to be open and vulnerable.
But also I have another question, because in education, because my background, I'm from the auto industry, and as far as I know, a lot of company right now, they put employees into an Excel sheet, and put their salary in one column. And once there's an AI bot who can totally replace that employee, they they lay off that employees out and replace with that cheap AI bot. And I understand we all talk about love, inclusion, all those like a high level of stuff in school. And for a student who gets so much love, got like a, kind of like a very accept that making mistakes, while in the industry is a little bit of opposite. Yeah, how do you see these types of gap? Because I mean, when I start teaching, I kind of not really get used to people start having a lot of like a wow, like like it feels like, oh, I'm training the junior designer or developer. It feels like that way. I want them to get up to speed, but later on I start thinking this is education. This is like trying to motivate them more like the kind heart stuff. So I start changing my style and become more softened. So, but another question is that we keep, yeah, because we are all in education field, we keep giving them a lot of love, tolerance, but when they go to the industry, it's totally the opposite. Yeah, what do you see these types of transition for a
Are you
student?
sure? I guess I would just question the assumption. Are you sure that at the industry it's the total opposite all the time?
Not really. I heard some, but for example, like a X, right? Like a Twitter or some other like a you can see like some news that there are a lot of industry that is very strict. For example, age discrimination or something you can see a lot of on news. But what do you see these types of things that how can we change the world to be? I mean, I know we are trying to make the education and trying to push and change the world, but there are still some types of things, and how can we, I don't know, change?
I would say, right now I'm working with my studio with MindWise. I train in enterprise. So I work in that world of business, but I see the businesses that have the values that you're talking about as ones that are either short-lived or they're going to be dinosaurs, because if they're based on values where
Yes.
they don't have any social emotional connection valuing humans, they're not going to have retention. So these businesses are places then that are receiving really bad reviews, really bad news. If that ever became public, that they have Excel spreadsheets where everybody's just treated as a number and just said goodbye at a moment's notice, that's not a company culture that's going to be sustainable, I don't think, for future of life that we want to build. So in society, I wouldn't say let's lower our expectations, because when we get to the workplace, it's going to be really cutthroat and there's no space for love. There's no space for, I actually think in the future, because of AI, because of a lot of this technology, humans are going to be asked even more, what do you want out of life? Which is why when I consult, I'm promoting new KPIs. Like, there are actually new measures for what it means to be successful as a business, because if they're not valuing well-being, their employees are going to leave. Like, they're basically like, okay, I don't want to work for a company that doesn't promote me thriving, because human thriving and human potential is the future right now. So this kind of dark view of, students being given a lot of emotional support and tools and then getting into a workforce that's drastically different. I think it's dystopia now. And, it's good that you're posing it and framing it, because I really believe, this year, there's an invitation, speaking at different places. I've spoken at the World Economic Forum before, and a lot of the leadership is looking in industry to have these new metrics for what success means. Because right now it needs to go beyond GDP. It's not just about finance. It is about human thriving. And I think it's not a concept any longer that's like, oh, this is soft skills, this is hard skills.
Yeah.
This is about elementally, what does it mean to be a human? And in this day and age, you can't get away from the numbers. Like, nobody wants to have higher suicide rates, higher burnout, higher problems. A future of human now, if you follow people like Amy Webb, they're looking at how people are looking at family structures, how people can, have different access to things like fertility models, how people are approaching having lives that they want. What does it mean? I'm curious, what will the future mean for families and society? And this is all, again, it's all in digital well-being in the chapter that's at the very end about the future, where I make a lot of, I steer away from predictions, because I think predictions is too much like prognosticating, but the trends toward artistry, creativity, biomimicry, and people feeling greater access to resources. How can we be stewards for our planet together? Businesses have to operate with, they're overexposed if they don't. And so I think in every culture that has rapid change, we can look back to the Renaissance. There tends to be different times in history, and this is one where there's a rapid change, and then people who have access to power usually try to tighten their hold because there's a threat there. The change is so powerful right now that there's a threat to the old models. So of course, older models are hanging tight and trying to, it can, I feel like there's a lot of metaphors that we can use in a lot of books that talk about why. That's why I think it's even more important for leaders to have an understanding. Again, digital well-being is well-being. We use digital tools throughout our life to connect right now. And so fueling that connection and that level of care for each other, with each other, it's a no-brainer for me. It's like the number one priority for the world right now is getting ourselves to think in new ways and not feel like we have to conform to old models that create binary thinking between soft and hard and caring and not. Hopefully people who choose those older models would just find themselves losing trust.
Cool. Yeah.
Social trust is needed for groups to thrive, and we've always, as humans, had social cooperative models that tend to build societies that thrive. And if you break down the cooperative models, the societies disintegrate. So so I get really excited, empowered, and kind of Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called The Anxious Generation.
Yes, I know about that one.
Yeah, so he and Scott Galloway were on a series together, and then Scott read the book that I just wrote and wrote an endorsement, and there's a lot of mission right now to also impact government agencies. Choices that are being made right now are going to have deep impacts, because the workforce, people, future of work and life depends on human thriving.
Yeah.
Let's not give up, Dom. Don't give up.
Okay. Yeah.
Keep going.
Keep going.
I always say that. Keep going. Really.
Yeah.
So
as for those like types of like a binary, right now we are trying to make, I would say, like reinforce the kind of like a well-being, digital well-being, mingle everything together, not that having like a binary. And sometimes, just like you said, that like my angel program, student who receive the help is also helping the student. So there's no the absolute position or absolute everything is more relatives, right? So I really like this. Like, it's very similar to, for me, I believe that everybody is in gray area. It's like everyone, or like everything is not really like good or bad or something. It's more like it's a state. We just being ourselves, right? So we are also like I would say gray area. I'm not a teacher. I'm also a student. I usually, like, I remember my previous workshop, I told students that at the end I have a survey. I said that I've been giving you a lot of feedback throughout those days. At the end, I want your feedback. I'm learning how to teach you and teach better. So I think we are all learning from each other, and there's no like absolutely like hierarchy or something. It's all relatives. So yeah, so I do think that it's all like a very well rounded, and yeah, so make our life more, I would say, harmony, right? Like not when we start accepting ourselves, and when we start accepting how the world is like that, then we start feeling like a balance and less anxious.
And I feel like you're inspiring me to tell a story because that balance led to something that I had wanted to share during this conversation, and now feels like a good moment, which is that I took a chance a year and a half ago, and I'd been working a lot in XR and a lot in corporate culture, and doing a lot that was in enterprise and industry. And at the same time, I wrote and published a book of poems. And the poetry was coming from experiences that I had specifically with whales, and marine biology. So I've been a poet for most of my adult life. Went back and studied poetry, have an MFA where my thesis focuses on poetry. So again, like learning those rules, then breaking them. And about fall of 2022, I started feeling as if with the rise of ChatGPT, a lot of AI tools, there was an automated kind of landscape that I was responding to. And also I was thinking about engagement with my own physical body. And a lot of poetry was just coming out. And it wasn't poetry produced by AI, but it was a feeling of roboticism. Like, what's the future going to be like when there are robots? And when it's kind of, I've been teaching a creative course for a while called Human Meets Robot. And the title of the musical chapter came out of the subtitle of my Human Meets Robot course, where I'd said, the heart is a digital kick drum, which is a
I love it.
play on a song by the Avett Brothers. Anyway, called The Heart is a Kick Drum. But I was thinking about the digital kick drum and how we, how love is actually, maybe we forget to talk about it, but it's underneath and between a lot of what we do is driven by some sort of passion, some sort of love, whether it's filial love or whether it's amorous love. So I started writing what would have been in medieval times, like a series of love poems, and it grew into this book called Digital Satori. My logo, MindWise, is part of what created the graphic. So the colors, if you look in MindWise as the logo,
it does look the
then
same.
became
Uh-huh.
the prompt was
Similar.
Alphonse Mucha and a lot of the Art Nouveau movement, which I really like, and nature, but it's all made with stable diffusion. Jose Ferrer Costa helped me with this, and he was in Barcelona, and we were doing different VR experiences together, based on Lilith and this idea of female force and energy and also shadows. So I started thinking about concepts too, like how much the Western culture doesn't talk about death that much. We kind of treat it as something to be avoided at all costs. And then we exist as breathers. I have friends who are marine biologists, and I went on this trip and saw whales, and I felt a really soulful connection to the whales, where the fact that they're breathers as well, and then do these deep dives down into the depths of the ocean. And for me, when I'm snorkeling or when I'm underneath the water and I'm looking up, you can kind of see the skin of the water. And for me, it feels a little bit like a quasi-death state. Like you can imagine submersion, and yet we're meant to breathe. We're meant to be in the air. And a lot of this is thoughtful, philosophical, and whales were reminding me a lot of love, because some of the whales that we were interacting with and studying, they want to play, they want to interact with humans, like whales and dolphins. They are, and they communicate with each other, and AI right now is kind of decrypting some of their communication. If you look at the CETI, the SETI project, or there was a great TED talk about translations between animals and how humans can learn that we are created to co-thrive on planet Earth. We're not like, the world is not created for us as much as we're created to be part of the world. So I wrote this book, Digital Satori, series of poems, some from past, some from present, and a lot of the poems are about experiences with marine biology and with whales and with surrender, some of the ideas, callings, and Ferryman Collective has that they
Deirdre.
do.
Yeah.
So Stephen was reading this book. He and Deirdre had heard about it, and back in 2023, in early part of the year, he picked up a copy and had this moment in the middle of the book where he read the title piece, Digital Satori, and he thought, I want to incorporate this into an
the play
experience.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I just play they invite me to their a brand new day, or I forgot the name of the show, but
called Uncanny Alley.
Yeah.
So
have you tried
Deirdre and Stephen, we had a conversation, and he said, Caitlin, I love this book. I love this poem. I want to have your permission to have it be part of our experience that we're building. And I thought, as an artist and, writer and creative, like, how awesome is that? I just
right.
But yes, I would love that. And then they invited me to the show that now, fast forward a year and a half, and now that poem is basically in the show as one of the crescendo moments, without giving away. I don't want to give away everything about the show, but it's very powerful as part of the experience. The poem drives part of the story and creates a feeling of wonder for people there, where things are animated, things are happening in kind of a swirl in a garden space. That's the kind of, it is the, a crescendo moment in the plot of the story. And within the experience, they say, and the digital poet Caitlin Krause created Digital Satori, and then the character robot reads this poem that is about love and is
also grow the heart.
So yeah, and love that's not rainbows and butterflies, but like, what world do we want to create in dystopian narratives where if we ignore it, our future's kind of lost? And I felt like, yes, kind of like when you're a poet that's a force for good, I was like, wow, I've been instantiated in this piece, and I get to be kind of in the DNA of it. And then the piece that they created, Ferryman Collective, it made it to Venice. It's part of the Immersive Festival that I think is just happening, closing right now. Maybe awards are already out, but I think it's, it's been nominated for a bunch of different pieces. And I think the journey of, sometimes people might wonder, well, why am I writing a poem? People don't always flock to bookstores saying like, let's get poetry. But when poetry's missing, people notice. Like, it's part of the ritual of being human. To codify experience and emotion in a poem is why poems are sought out at places like weddings and funerals and ceremony. And the ceremony of poetry was the first story sharing from ancient times. That's how we pass down meanings and values that we have as a culture. So I feel really honored to be an XR poet, where people could access and say, hey, not only can we, but for me to see that, it created like total goosebumps, and also humility. Like, I don't know where that piece totally came from, but I trusted it. I wanted it to thrive and be in the world. So I feel really like that's one of the stories that I'm honoring in this moment on our share together, because it's wild. It's totally wild.
Love it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. And also, for the poetry in XR, do you want to share with us like your event? Uncanny Alley New Day is the one that the Deirdre. I try it. It was a very wild experience, and I remember like Deirdre and Stefan. Two of them were play like tons of different characters, and I didn't even realize that. And I love how like I mean it's like a like also for me like literature is also a theater types of like a thing at the beginning, and story once was being told.
Yeah.
When it was like an ancient time, Holman, right, start singing about the story. It's supposed to be interactive. It's supposed to be acting. So I think Pharaoh Collective is perfectly put people into that character and being drive. And also, I remember I interviewed Deirdre, like, what if somebody asks something that is totally outside of script? What will you do? And they said they have somehow a way to guide them back.
Yeah,
Good. Yeah.
there's an integrity in the freedom of choice. You do have buffers that kind of guide you about how to be, but that freedom is part of why I think people like collective effervescence, because they're in the ritual of that story. They're invited to sometimes, be human and look the other way. And it's not always like one shiny object and you have to be led by the nose. It's really, really clever. I love this experience. And Digital Wellbeing, the book, there is a chapter where I talk about the history of Beowulf and some of the stories of ancient times where it was part of that rhyme scheme. Part of poetry is ideally acted out in immersive theater that then becomes the story that you remember and you want to pass down, because you remember experiences. You don't remember passive. You remember the doing and the being in co-presence.
Yeah, and the other one is footprints through time. Can you tell us about the experience?
Sure. For this one, it would help. I know, Christine,
Can I share my screen? Yeah, I was about to share the other one, but this one has a nice
I love the poster
image.
stuff.
Yes.
I just think the image does say a lot. Footprints through time is an augmented reality experience. So this right now is my chrysalis moment where we have a book coming out. This experience is also coming out in the same week. This is going to be made public. So the Unknown Project is a team that I've been working with. So part of my company, MindWise, partnered with Unknown Project and also Collimation. And we put together this experience that really animates stories of formerly enslaved people crossing the banks of the Ohio River to freedom. And in essence, stories of layers of American history often are hard, they're very heavy. So these stories of former enslavement, we wanted to add a spirit of wonder and awe to them and create engagement models that would be through animated storytelling, through people being on the site physically, having that be an anchor, and then seeing the spatial storytelling with things appearing, stories in the sky, two main characters who have a dialogue. And you can see in the synopsis, you as the viewer play a character. Like, you're invited to play the character of Sam, who's best friends with the character Isaac, who you're seeing in augmented reality telling a story about discovering his great-great-grandmother and the stories that she's telling him about her time in Kentucky. And so what I co-created is this experience where you understand different perspectives. You understand that sometimes the history of racism is not taught in schools, but you're on the site and, partnering with places like museums in the area, a cemetery in the area where people, were buried but not given graves with names. So this is part of why the Unknown Project is making more accessible and for all ages of people. Then they can come and experience, ages and cultures, experience something that's invitational, rather than reading on a plaque or rather than seeing something that's static. So I've loved the whole experience. It's really close to my heart. I'm going to be in Kentucky as part of the unveiling, because some people will say to me, oh, can I experience it? And it would be so awesome if we could have a mobile geolocator so you could have this, in your backyard to see a sample. Right now, it has to be anchored in that physical space in Kentucky. But people who come through, they're going to the Fraser History Museum. There's part of this experience inside the Fraser History Museum where you see the installation of the physical art, but then you have the AR layered on top of it. And it's been an awesome, we're producing behind the scenes footage right now because, for me being at meta stage for some of the filmings and, seeing how the actors got into their roles, I've been producing, so I'm a producer in this project, since middle of last year is when the idea came about. And then we've been working on this for the past 9 months. So book and this have been kind of in sequence together. Producing it, I can't say enough because these projects, I think, allow more people to have invitations, like people who wouldn't maybe self-affiliate with some of the history. They'd say, oh, how does this engage? And it engages through wonder and also through curiosity and through understanding that humans want to belong. And I think love and healing are side by side in this experience. You see that activists in the state of Kentucky were also invited to have their literal footprints documented. And then those footprints that you see held up are part of what's been put into the ground on the site that's on the banks of the river. So you can kind of experience this firsthand. And I was also there in June to see this experience and see how people who were the different leaders in the area came in person to honor. So so the mayor of Louisville, like a lot of different people have come together to honor the history. Josh Miller, Hannah Drake, Adrian Rashad Driscoll. These are the 3 co-producers that have been part of this project. And it's taught me a lot too, put me into a curious state of, okay, how can XR have a social component that's also motivated to tell hidden stories that previously didn't have a way to create a bridge for communities. And I think more museums are looking to modernize the way that they approach their installations and incorporate more AR.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So as for like those types of like human and also experiment and experience types of project, I think XR really helps people to empathize. For example, when we see or put people in the kind of like for example, like a theaters, like the show. When I was an inmate in the prison, and I saw a police outside, I immediately can feel that, oh, I'm under and I'm being controlled. All the feelings you can kind of just get it instead of, for example, reading a book, long paragraphs, and you still need to think about what's that feeling is. So I think for those like immersive storytelling really can help us to understand and empathize more.
And imagine for accessibility, the people who don't have access to headsets. That's why I think this experience is powerful, because it's all phone-based and using WebXR. So the Unknown Project with the Footprints Through Time, it's all accessible through people's phones. It's all streaming, so they don't have to install anything. They don't have to download or sign up for accounts or anything like that. They can just use the streaming XR through the web and have that experience. Because I think one of the hurdles that I would say people encounter right now is accessibility. If it were an in-headset experience, then it might prevent people who are physically on site at the edge of the Ohio River from, seeing something animated around them. So so a lot of what I'm thinking about lately is the whole continuum, the whole gamut, and how a lot of the worlds I build, I'd love for people to have a fully immersive headset experience. And how can we stage where form fits function? And there are different engagements on site that also use AR tools that are streaming online on the web to make it that accessible.
Cool. So we can go to the last questions that I am very interested. What do you see that what types of, for example, like career or like this is also for my student, for example, like what do you see these types of like if people want to work on this or inspired by you, what do you suggest them, for example, like a young student? We all know that the future is unknown and it's very different from what we used to know. What do you see or what advice would you give to the college or university student to prepare for the future? Yeah.
I mean, basically, we've been talking about it the whole conversation today. I would give them advice about staying curious, being self-compassionate. There's enough pressure these days on performance, but why do people come to colleges in the first place? Some people think colleges are dying out. So, what does it mean to be a self-learner? Because a lot of people understand when they feel fired up and turned on by something. I read recently that there's a statistic where it used to be that people wanted to pursue a career in being an influencer. And
like a Gen Z, like everybody has a mic, right? And they have a phone and they all love like everyday traveling and people sponsor your life, something like that.
Yeah. So who knows why, but I've heard that statistic is going down, and in part because the engagement models are being shown for what they are. And so more people who are in Gen Z and Gen A want authenticity. Like they want something that's separating their space. Their private life is sacred. Like they don't want, what benefit does it have? So, future of career, I would say to students, what lights you up? What really makes you come alive? And all these things I say for students are things I say for adults at any age. It's like what actually makes us feel a sense of uplift. And how can you go more deeply into that? So how can these contemplative practices kind of lead us toward our ikigai? Ikigai, that theme of, I believe it's Japanese in origin. I saw Christine kind of light
it.
Right? You want to explain ikigai? There are 4 parts to it, right?
Oh, I don't know all the parts. Yeah.
It's basically what you have a passion for.
Right. I did a whole exercise on this a few years ago. I'm very interested in this kind of thing.
From memory, what you have a passion for, what the world needs. What you're skilled at, and what can earn you a living. So if you can make those 4 fit together, because it would be great to have something that lights you up and you're good at it and, the world needs it, but maybe it's not going to have a model where you can make a career out of it. Then that's your hobby. That could be your hobby. So anyway, you go into kind of an ikigai mindset and start to source, what do you actually want to do? Not what do you have to do, or what did your parents tell you had to do to make somebody else proud? A lot of people ask me, how do you write a book? And they want to be coached on writing a book. And one of my first questions is, well, there are 2 questions, not just any book, but I'll ask them, well, what do you want to write about? Like, what are you curious about? Because a book is basically your learning journey. And if you're not curious about your topic, then kind of who cares? And then the second question is, do you actually want to write a book?
Yes, that's a lot of work.
Well, the image of writing a book that's motivating them is like having a book, which is great. But then it's like, okay, like did if it comes from that pure source of intention, like actually you want to write a book. It's not just like check that box, credential that. Then you're really motivated. Because I think it was Nietzsche maybe who said, you can do what you want, but you can't want what you want. Like we want things, and desire is kind of interesting because you can't program yourself to desire something. And when you really start to tap into like, who am I? What's my core identity that makes me me? Then you start to understand, oh yeah, I actually feel motivated to serve in certain ways, which doesn't mean I have to suffer, but I do believe our human life, when we can connect with what we want to be in service toward, then we start to believe that our life is a combination of passion meeting a world's greatest need. So I I talk with students about that, and then it feels like, okay, so future of work is going to be about a title that we can't predict exists, but I'll know internally how I can meet the conditions of being aware of that emergent future. Like when that title exists, I've already kind of built up mindset, skill set, tool set where I have certain ways of being that meet that need, and also adaptation along the way. People having great mentors along the way really helps. I think everyone can use co-mentoring spaces. So I'd encourage students, and myself as an adult, I love the collective groups that I'm a part of. I love my opportunities to kind of have other people hold a mirror up to me. So I'd want them not to do all of this soul searching in isolation. Like they don't all have to go to
That's
their
for sure.
Star Wars island or something like that. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So this is such a inspiring talk between three of us, and I really, really enjoyed the talk. And every time when I listen to our talk, I feel like my entire soul was lifted up because, like when I go back to the reality, I always feel like, wow, there are so many performance I have to do as a teacher. And also you see like, for example, like I just received a list of forms that evaluation, like student will evaluate the teacher, like, does this teacher make you feel like you were a success during the class through the syllabus and 1 to 5. I was like, wow, am I like, I start kind of see my performance through that chart. So so I understand that we have a lot of performance that is kind of like necessarily that we have to meet, but also it's also good to have some space that we can relax and just say, yeah, I'm a human. This is my first time teaching and I just give myself a break. Next time will be better. It's the process of improving.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has
Cool.
been really, really wonderful. I feel like you two, just our conversation kind of expands, grows into different places. I feel like that's the whole theme. It meets us and our diversity where we're at. Like humans are not only one thing. Like each of us is a designer, a creator, also a mentor, an artist, and also a scientist. So it's that yes and mentality that I want to get across also through my work, that leaders can be learners, and that people showing vulnerability is actually a good thing for social trust, and that there are many exercises and ways that people can play with that model, which is why I put a lot of the book content into that state of how can I to be able to empower people. So I'm grateful this conversation happened just as the book is launching. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, Christine, do you have any other questions?
Oh, no, I don't have, I feel like, I could probably talk to you like for a long time. So I was like, wow, this is just really resonating with me, the whole
so
conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, because a lot of my work is in a similar vein, and the purpose and vision. So I appreciate this.
Awesome.
Yeah, a lot. So yeah, I mean, I can keep going on, but I'm like, no, this is good. Let's just, I know, because how long will the podcast be? 3 hours? No.
We're going to challenge everybody that has the really
exactly.
Cool. Yeah.
I like long podcasts, to be honest with you.
Right? I bet we could have good
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Little highlights.
Yeah, I don't have anything. I was really just absorbing a lot of it too. And yeah.
I keep taking notes and
would love to talk to you anytime. Yeah, exactly.
That's how I feel. I feel like today, I always feel complete kind of meeting this moment. And I do think it's nice to talk with you both and have a feeling of resonance. And I guess the only thing I just keep thinking about meeting this moment. Like here we are, the time that someone's listening to this is going to be in a state of future. We're predicting it, but here we are in fall of 2024 or beginning of autumn, end of summer. And it does feel like a transition time. It's the start of the academic year for a lot of people. It could be the start of new careers for people. It could be the start of something. And I just want to plant that seed with intention and also celebrate for anyone listening. If you're doing something new in your life, it's not just the raw beginning. It's like you're bringing everything that is you. There's a feeling of continuity and confluence. And also it does feel like a moment in history where there's a lot of search for meaning. So what is the meaning quotient? How do people feel encouraged in community that they matter? And also that asking questions about meaning is what's going to drive, I think, the future. That's what it's going to drive people to have high bars for why they fight for well-being, why there's a priority on imagination and wonder. It's not just a nice to have. It's I feel like I'm part of a movement right now where if what I'm sharing can be a source of inspiration for that movement, it's that meaning makes all the difference. And humans are the ones that imprint and design and define that meaning in an age where we can use computing technology to help us.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me share my voice and get that across today. That's a gift.
Yeah, thank you so much for lifting up the entire I feel like I feel my heart is very lightened after our conversation. Yeah, and I feel like during the kind of like a long vacation last week. Oh, there's love. Yeah, I traveled to Tahoe Lake. And it seems like our conversation can be around Tahoe Lake or not really Tahoe Lake. Sure. It's like the travel resort, but it's more like the trail, the national park. And it's just like a beautiful lake and everything, like not many people around. And it's just like everything is nature. And two of us can just talk about very enjoy the spiritual a chat. Yeah.
Thank you. You made that happen by listening. So thank you for setting the conditions.
Yep.
Made that happen to both of you.
Well, yeah. Thank you. So, yeah, that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening. We release episodes weekly. If you enjoy this conversation, click out our other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Support us by giving us a follow and a 5-star rating, and subscribe our channel and give us a like. Thank you so much, and see you next time.
Thank you.